Audio Jungle, Audio Jungle, Audio Jungle, Audio.
Good afternoon. I am a thermal plant person running a large supercritical plant in Punjab. It meets a lot of the energy requirements of the state. But today I am here to talk to you about the journey that we all must make, not only in India but globally. And that is the journey from thermal to renewables, which is a journey towards the future of energy. Before I go to renewables, why is thermal energy important for a country like India? India consumed a lot of electrical energy last year, 1.2 trillion units. And the demand is growing, at least 5 to 6% per year. Of the 344 gigawatts that is installed in the country, 65% is thermal. So bulk is actually in coal-fired thermal capacity. And how has it grown? 45 times in 50 years. A lot of investments, centers, state, private. Collectively, all the thermal plants did 61% PLF, which means there is a lot of spare capacity in the system. Very reliable, proven technology. We can deliver when you need electrical energy. We can light up homes, we can run factories. We are always there at your service. We are also the cheapest. India has got 5th largest coal reserves in the world, in excess of 300 billion metric tons. And bulk of the new capacity that has got created in the country is in the vicinity of these coal-bearing areas. And the price structure for coal is such that we get coal at a cheaper price than non-power industries. And government has a big role to play in power generation. So what's wrong with it when everything is going well? First and foremost, the impact of coal mining. A lot of land is involved in coal production, lakhs of hectares. 1/4 of it is actually forest land, expected to grow exponentially. What does it mean? You resettle and rehabilitate a lot of people, you impact wildlife, there is pollution of water in mining. Air pollution, when you mine for coal, there are fugitive emissions of methane and carbon dioxide. Coal fires, transportation. Even if when you wash coal, you create washery residue and sludge, which is not very good for the environment. And eventually, when you are done with the mine, you need to reclaim the mines, and we do not do a great job of mine reclamation. Thermal power plants emit a lot of greenhouse gases. All of you are very environmentally conscious these days. But these numbers are quite staggering. A typical 660 megawatt unit, more than 40 lakh tons of carbon dioxide, 21,000 tons of sulfur dioxide, 5,000 tons of NOx, and 420 tons of particulate matter every year. India's thermal power plants collectively have pumped into India's atmosphere more than 900 million tons of carbon dioxide, an enormous amount of SOx, NOx, and particulate matter. The numbers are quite staggering. And no wonder that 14 of the world's most polluted cities are in India. One study says that 1.2 million people in the country die due to air pollution. And more than 2 lakh crore is needed for retrofitting the existing plants with pollution control measures. Do we have the resources? How will it impact the tariff? Will you continue to get cheap power? These are in the realm of uncertainty as we speak. To add to the problems, thermal power plants are also water guzzlers. One unit of 660 megawatt needs 16,50,000 liters of fresh water every hour. India's thermal power plants have consumed 50 crore liters of water per hour last year. It's a very high consumptive use. It impacts agriculture. It impacts life in our rivers and ponds and lakes. And it also impacts the amount of water that is available for domestic consumption. When we have burnt coal in the power plant, we are left with ash. In a typical 660 megawatt unit, you will see 5.3 lakh tons of fly ash and 1.4 lakh tons of bottom ash being generated every year. Some plants like ours are lucky, we are able to dispose of fly ash. It goes into cement plants. But bottom ash disposal is not easy. Most power plants have ash ponds. And what are ash ponds? They are simple repositories for collecting something which has no immediate use. And they pose a lot of hazards. It could lead to groundwater leaching and contamination. Many times, fugitive emissions, ash actually goes out from the ash ponds, affects the life and health of people in surrounding areas. So it's a difficult challenge that thermal power industry grapples with all the time. Which brings us to the topic of renewable energy. This is the energy of the future. I will not spend too much time. Probably all of you, being well aware, know that it's abundant. It's a gift of the nature. It's also safe. It leaves a much smaller carbon footprint. While operating, there are no emissions like a thermal power plant. Very cheap to maintain, very effective to operate at a low cost. And unlike the conventional power that must go through very large grid lines, you can have beautiful off-grid applications for renewable power. Few years ago, we thought that renewable energy is not affordable, but recent evidence is suggesting that it has also become quite affordable. And some of the recent bids that have come for solar power, if you're tracking them, of 2 rupees 44 paisa per unit, are really, really attractive. So everything seems to be going right for renewable energy. But what are the challenges? Can we really adopt it immediately? As a country, when we transition from thermal to renewables, what are the challenges that we will encounter and we are encountering? First challenge is predictability and reliability. When you run a coal-fired plant, you can respond to demand, you can ramp up, ramp down. If the load dispatch center gives us a schedule, we can follow it by the minute. You cannot do that in a wind power plant or a solar power plant. They are dependent on weather conditions. They are impacted by the forces of climate change. If because of climate change, the sunshine insolation changes in a particular geography, if the wind pattern changes in a particular location, the PLFs of those units will undergo a change. It's also impacted by air pollution. And the most difficult is the plant load factors are really low. While a typical coal-fired plant can easily operate at 90-95% PLF, even 100% PLF consistently, solar would operate at 20% PLF, wind will operate at 16% PLF, which is really not very impressive. They also need a lot of land. A typical 500 megawatt solar farm needs 2,250 acres of land. On a comparative basis, it is 4.5 times what you need to build a thermal power plant. Also, since these kind of renewable energy projects are located in difficult locations, grid access is difficult. It's not easy to lay the transmission lines that will allow you to evacuate the power from those locations. You need to build storage and meaningful storage capacity so that you can ensure reliability. And as the world is racing towards building greater storage capacity, we are also realizing that there are hazards in mining of cobalt. And there's a lot of concern in many global companies who are involved in renewable energy to make sure that the companies which are engaged in mining of cobalt, notably in Africa, they're not following practices that are hazardous to the local communities. If you want to use renewable power, you want to prioritize them because there is bright sunshine, the wind is blowing in your favor, you will have to back down the thermal power capacity. And this capacity then gets stranded. It affects the efficiency of thermal power plants. They are designed to operate at high PLFs. So suddenly a plant that is running at full load, it goes to 75% or 60%. The efficiency drops. And therefore you need backup thermal capacity to meet the demand. Suddenly the wind changes direction, the cloud that comes over the solar farm, you need backup capacity to meet the demand in the grid. To harness the full power of renewables, you need smart grids and smart metering. In a highly futuristic scenario, everybody could be generating renewable power through solar panels, through small micro turbines. You should have a system of metering and grid management which is very intelligent and smart. And not only that, the entire pricing structure of electricity will be very specific to what's happening right now in the grid with various sources. That requires a lot of investment. So the true cost of renewable energy is not what you see in the newspapers, which is 2 rupees 44 paisa or whatever. You need to take into account the cost of standard capacity, the cost of providing grid access, and in some instances also the government subsidy that is required to support renewable capacity. And lastly, what makes it difficult is the very difficult financial health of distribution companies, because eventually they buy the power and sell it to the consumers at large. And when on an average, every unit of electricity that is sold in the country is at a loss, and most of these state discoms are supported by large volumes of subsidy by the government, unless that is fixed, renewable power will continue to have challenges. So what are the imperatives? As a country, what are the things that should be driving us? First and foremost, energy security. We want to be a developed country. We want our industries to grow. We want our people to have access to electricity. We want power for all, reliable, affordable power. But we also want to comply with the Paris Convention commitments, which is 35% reduction in greenhouse gases emission by 2030. So these are the overarching policy objectives within which we have to take the country forward. So what's our response? Our response is building some of the biggest solar farms in the world. What's happening in the field of solar energy in India is really exciting. And the government's contribution is immense. They are creating large solar farms where the land has been acquired, clearances have been taken, grid access has been provided, and the solar generators are competing with each other to provide the cheapest cost of electricity. And what is right now happening is well and truly exciting, and some of the biggest programs in the world are right now running in our country. We are also retrofitting existing plants. Flue gas desulfurization units, equipment to address the NOx emissions are being installed in a large capacity of more than 145 gigawatts. India is also investing in pumped storage. This is what you need as a backup capacity. When the renewable capacity goes down, the pumped storage comes back into action. And India is also committed to develop a lot of solar microgrids. So 63 solar microgrids in villages of 1.8 megawatt peak capacity currently being developed. But there's more that we can do. And first and foremost, what we need to do is to aggressively retire old thermal capacity. There's a lot of thermal capacity in the country which is highly polluting, which produces a disproportionate amount of greenhouse gases. They must be retired. At least 45 gigawatt by 2027. We also need to put gas-based peaking generation capacity. 7,500 megawatt of standard projects exist. They have an advantage of very short startup and shutdown time. They need to be brought back on the grid. India has a lot of offshore wind opportunity. Globally, it's an exciting new field that's developing. We have a large offshore wind potential that needs to be explored. And regardless of how costly the investment is, we must start investing in smart grids and smart metering. We also need to take a look at renewable power that is supplied by nuclear power generation sector. The world has been put into a state of shock after the Fukushima disaster. And all the countries of the world have gone into a shell. Barring the 3 incidents that happened globally, 3 Mile Island incident in the US, Chernobyl disaster in Russia, USSR, which is now Ukraine, and Fukushima in Japan, nuclear power generators have been working silently, quietly for a large number of years and providing emission-free electricity to a large part of humanity. I think we need to go back and see what we can do in this area with proper safeguards. And lastly, we need to reform our state distribution companies. There is a lot of theft, there is a lot of inefficiency, and there is a lot of subsidy. A lot of people get free power. In many states, agriculturists get free power. Those who are billed, they do not pay. And some of the biggest defaulters are government organizations. The result, the DISCOMs are in the red and they need large doses of money as subsidy from the government to survive. This must be brought to an end. I think all these ideas, either solar or renewables, wind power, other forms of renewable energy, they're all very interesting and exciting, but they need a healthy, functional distribution sector. India has taken some steps to address this, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I have no doubt that in the years to come, we will see this transition happening and we will successfully cross some of these challenges. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.